budget meeting. I'm Heather Clayball, the budget officer for FCPS, and tonight's meeting is really about hearing from you. We're going to do a brief presentation, and then will be Dr. Albin, and who is our superintendent, and Leslie Pellegrino, our CFO, will be here to take questions, comments, concerns, and we'll be spending the next hour discussing the budget. So let's get things started. So as an overview, our operating budget consists of two funds, our restricted fund and our unrestricted fund. If you think about it, our restricted fund is really grant-based driven, and it's only about 67% of our budget, or excuse me, $67 million of our budget. The remaining $511 million is our unrestricted budget. And now that's our operating budget. So it's essentially the day-to-day activities, salaries, and other items that we take care of. In FY18, that budget was $578 million. Now this operating budget does not include our capital projects, our food and nutrition services, self-insurance, the artificial turf fund, student activity, or OPEB funds. Our revenues are generated predominantly from two sources, our state and county, and we do receive a small portion of our revenues from the federal government and then through some other grants. As of last year, our state funding was 47% and our county funding was 47% as well. Our expenditures are divided up in 15 categories, and this is how we report our expenditures to the state. And as you can see, our predominant spending is in salaries and also our fixed charges. And for your information, the fixed charges includes things like taxes, insurance, those type of items. And as you can see from our pie chart, the salaries are 59% of our budget. And then the fringes take up another 27%. So all total, about 87% a year of our budget goes to salary and fringes to support our staff. So right now, we're just beginning the process of the FY19 budget. It started in November through the departmental request phase, where departmental managers, budget managers, were able to make requests for things that they needed foresee coming up for the next year. Things including inflationary expenditures, new items who required funding. And so right now we're just in the process of reviewing those requests and also beginning our public engagement. Tonight is our first event that we've had with the public. We also did a budget lunch and learn with staff. And the goal of these events is to get input so that we can help to set our priorities prior to releasing the superintendent's recommended budget, which will be happening in January. And also at that time in January, we will do our budget work session where the board will review the budget, typically by budget center and by account. And then as we progress through the remainder of the year, at the beginning of the year, the remainder of our fiscal year, in February we'll have a public hearing, which this year will take place at the new Frederick High School. And then we'll also have the approval of the budget. And then that budget is then sent over to the county executive. And the county executive releases it in April to be approved by the county council. And the county council has until May 31st to approve the budget. And then they return it back to us with whatever they approve, their 47%, and then we will go ahead and review it and create the budget based upon the categories. So looking forward to 2019. Right now, we're just in the process of reviewing our revenues, and most of our revenues are predominantly set by enrollment. The state revenues, we provide enrollment in several different categories, and that's what establishes our state revenues. And then locally, we also use enrollment. And by statute, the Frederick County government is required to continue maintenance of effort for our revenues, which basically states that there's a per student cost. And every time as our enrollment increases, we would get an increase proportionally based upon those revenues. This year, as we're reviewing our expenditures, we have three guiding principles. Our transition to the third year of the teacher pay scale, strengthening this FCPS infrastructure, finally supporting students experiencing significant challenges. We've also will be reviewing student enrollment growth, which leads to additional teaching positions, inflationary cost, any mandated items, and then very lastly, any new request that the staff might have. So right now we're going to go ahead and open up the open up the floor for questions or comments, and Dr. Albin will be here to answer any questions that you have this evening.
One thing about enrollment growth, and it's one of the odd things that we have when we receive our funding from the state. They take a look at our September 30th enrollment. So they're looking at how many students are sitting in Frederick County Public Schools right now. And that's what they'll base our per pupil allocation on. But we need to staff for the students that we know are going to be coming in 18-19. And so we actually are projecting about a 700 student increase. So we're going to be providing staff to deal with that increase in enrollment, but the money we're going to get is going to be based on the students we have sitting in our classrooms right now. So that's just one of the nuances that we have to try to navigate through. And this year, we also, when we take a look at enrollment growth, we are opening 2 new buildings, and so we also had to look at expanding staff that's going to be able to maintain and clean those buildings. And so we also are going to be looking at, well, last year we put 3 buses in because of enrollment growth. So when we say enrollment, primarily that deals with our school-based staff, but that also sometimes includes staff to support the functions of the school building. So this is your chance to talk to me about priorities you would like to see in the budget, questions you have about how we put this budget together. Because if not, I'll tell you all the challenges we face, and everybody will walk out of here feeling a little sad tonight. Yes, sir. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. We need you to speak into the mic so those who are watching can hear.
Thank you. Didn't realize people were watching. Hi, I'm Rob Harbin. I'm a parent at Parkway Elementary School. Probably know.
I remember you.
I remember. So, probably sick of seeing me at this point, but
never. We always appreciate having people participate.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I guess I have three points or comments or questions. One is I know that one of the things you're looking to do is to take support staff, media specialists specifically, from some of the smaller schools and kind of take part of their time to some of the more overcrowded schools. I guess, as you know, we have concerns about this as one of the smaller schools. I guess one of the things I would observe is, and I've seen this from my professional life, if you split people's time, that kind of takes away from the team development that you get. If somebody's full-time working on a team, working in one building, you kind of get a team dynamic that sort of is a full force multiplier for that individual. And if people are, and it's just human nature, if people are forced to be in two different places, it's much more difficult to kind of get that kind of team dynamic going. So I think that makes it more difficult on our media specialists and other specialists, plus the transit time and gas and that sort of thing. So I guess what I would suggest that you do is when you do your budget request what you want. I mean, request a budget that would be sufficient to have one media specialist in all of the schools and as many additional that you need in the overcrowded schools to meet their needs too. The worst they can say is no, and maybe if you can sell it well enough and get enough public support, maybe we may get that, and that'd be best for everybody. The other thing, I know you do have a staffing model that you use that takes into account number of students and the complexity factors and those sort of things. I guess what I would suggest is taking something from the software community, the idea of open source, where I think it would be helpful if you shared that the algorithms and the equations and the details of your model with the public. That will, I think, help build trust in your process, and also you may people with more people looking at it, they may discover things that you didn't know about it. I don't know what exact technology you're using, but I'm sure that some way could be found to show that to the public.
Well, you were at the last board meeting, right? And that's right, because we had done that during the work session.
Mm-hmm.
We actually gave the board several different formulas that they might want to consider in determining if a school was a tier 1 or a tier 2. And they actually voted to use formula E.
Okay.
And so it looks at what is your percentage of students who receive free and reduced meals, what's the percentage of mobility, what's the percentage of English learners, students who receive special education services, students who have 504 plans. And so what we do is, and again, for you it would be challenging, but you could certainly do it if you wanted to. Every school has a profile. And so if you're within a certain percentage rate, you get 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. And then it's the cumulative points that put you in one of those tiers.
Right.
And so that formula will be presented in the budget book so that the public will be able to see exactly how we determined if a school was a tier 1 or a tier 2. And what will happen for schools that are tier 2, that means they have more complexity factors, and therefore they will get some additional resources to support having to provide probably additional intervention services, possibly additional mental health support, those types of things. And for our elementary schools, last year we were able to use that tiering to reduce class size in K through 2 at some of our high needs schools. And so that will be included in the budget book. So it's not really we're not throwing it into software, we're using that formula and pulling it from our data system to calculate the points for each school.
So there's a spreadsheet somewhere where this
There's
is...
a spreadsheet somewhere. Now, one of the things, and there are pros and cons to this, but some administrators have asked if the public will look differently at a school if they know your school is a tier 1 or a tier 2. So we have not put out a list of which schools fall into those tiers because of that concern. You can tell me right now, because this is an opportunity for the community to give us feedback. Do you feel like you would like to see the list of those schools so that you know?
Yes, I'd like, well, I'm kind of a geek, but I'd like to see the spreadsheets too. No, I think in general you're going to build more public confidence if you're more open with your decision-making process and all of the data and reasoning that goes into that decision. I mean, I think if you're making decisions on things that you're not sharing, that kind of people will imagine things. They'll imagine the worst. They'll imagine probably something worse than what you're actually doing. Whereas if you kind of share it with them in detail, I think then you've told them why you're doing what you're doing.
And a lot of this goes back to our board passed an equity policy not too long ago. And you know that one of the priorities in our strategic plan is to eliminate the achievement gap. And we recognize, and I don't know if you watched the board meeting when we had the presentation on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And there's been a lot of research about stressors that children experience at a young age and what that does to the development of their brain and the different types of supports and interventions they may need in order to be successful. And one of the first flags for looking at ACEs is living in poverty because of the stress that puts in a family. And so much like that formula I just described, there are certain things that they're looking for, and they kind of look at how many of these factors have impacted a child. And so that is also weighing very heavily with our board, recognizing that we have a lot of children coming to school with many more emotional issues, and so wanting to take a look at the additional supports that might be necessary to try to level the playing field for them as well. And so the needs are great. The dollars aren't as great, and so we are trying to balance and look at using our resources as strategically as we can in order to meet the needs of all of our very, very different schools.
So the free and reduced lunch, that's sort of your proxy for whether the students are,
It's a
subject to these?
proxy for income level.
Okay, right. So that's how you're determining whether they're in this ACEs
Well,
category?
in ACEs, I don't know that ACEs can use free and reduced meals
Right.
because that's data we have as a school system. I would imagine that's just as the service providers get to know the family, they would know, is this a family that's needing assistance? Where are they economically? And that's just one factor that gets checked. If a child has been physically abused, that would be another factor that has been checked. If a child's living in a home where the parents have drug addiction, that would, so things that would bring trauma to young children, children living in a home, and the more of those that you have, the more severe it's going to impact your ability to be rational, to
Sure.
stay tuned academically. And our board had a presentation on that. And again, it's an area where we're looking at trying to do more training with our staff on recognizing it, understanding it, and learning the best strategies for working with those students.
So is that actually working into your model, into your staffing model? Is that part of the complexity factors, whether they have all these kind of attributes
That
of
would
poverty?
be looking at an individual student.
Okay,
Our complexity model looks at factors we know
Right.
impact achievement and behavior in schools.
right.
And so if you were to take a look at our schools and list them with the percent of students on free and reduced meals, from the most to the least, what you're going to see is test scores from the lowest to the highest, suspension rates that are higher to lower.
Right.
And again, if we're going to eliminate achievement gaps, we have to make sure we're putting the resources in to offset some of the areas where we know, and I brought up ACEs as an example of, you're hearing our board talk a lot about mental health needs and providing support in that area. Things that are creating complexity in our schools are also the things that are creating complexity in the lives of the children. And that comes with them into the school.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? Or?
I'll scratch my shoulder, but yes, on the heels of that, and I want to preface this by saying I am an educator because I'm going to mention sports, but that's not my emphasis. But my sons are in high school, and they go to Governor Thomas Johnson High School, where I would venture to guess many of those complexities that you're speaking of are manifested in the adolescents, not the children, so to speak, that are at the building. There's a lot of talk every 6 to 8 weeks about who's eligible. Like one of the de-stressors, as the football team mom and the athletic boosters president, I get to know a lot of the athletes, some of their families, because our families don't come in droves to support their athletes because they're working. Because the most recent numbers we have, that I have access to, are our free and reduced meals rate is 48%. So to pay $5 and bring little brothers and little sisters is a hardship. Our parents can't do it. I met parents at the senior football banquet this year that I've never laid eyes on, and my son's played football for 4 years. So that being said, there is limited funds. But I wanted to maybe explore a little bit, and I spoke, I think, 3 meetings ago here about the athletic budgets and how those are determined. Because my understanding, and I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong, is that our budgets are currently created for our athletes out of the $5, I think, from the $93 that an athlete pays, and then the gate fees, of which I think $1 comes downtown and 4 stays for an adult and 1 for our students. So from our school in particular, that puts us at a further disadvantage because we had 20 athletes, to my knowledge, through the boosters, apply for waivers this fall. So those were 20 athletes for which we did not get the $5 because they didn't pay their $93. Then we have empty stands because our parents can't afford to come in many cases. It's not that they don't want to come. Oftentimes we get our chain gang and our announcers because in return they get in for free. So that's how we get our volunteers. Those funds are set funds. So when we go to a more affluent school, Oakdale, Urbana, Linganore, and we play, their stands are packed. So then it further perpetuates, so they have a bigger budget, and it further perpetuates the difference between what our school has access to and our students who are in such a need of that belonging, that our families are fractured, and being a member of a team is huge. We don't have the funds to make it look the same, to make it feel the same, and to provide the same experience for our athletes at our school. So since those are set dollars, I would wonder if the county will explore distributing them differently. Not to put a school that has more athletes at a disadvantage, because they need more money proportionately, but do they need all of their gate fee? When our school, if that's how the budgets are determined, I don't think that that's necessarily an equitable approach. So I was curious as to if that's being examined as part of the equity issues.
I'm smiling because you're making many of the same arguments I made when I put a committee together to take a look at that. And I can tell you that there was not a lot of support for rethinking that.
Not a lot of support from the schools who want their money, but.
Well, I do want to clarify a few things. Our operating budget does pay for the athletic directors, for the coaches, for trainers. So not all of the money is generated by the athletic, the participation fee and the gate fee. So there is money, but I want to make sure the public understands that that's not how that, there is a lot of money that comes out of the operating budget to support as well. We have had the situation with fees for referees and officials going up. And so we did, are we taking $2 to support that? $1 extra. We are going to start pulling from the gate fees $1 extra in order to cover the cost of the increase in the fees for officials because we felt that was very critically important for safety. So I hear what you're saying, and again, this committee met and discussed before our board had passed their equity policy. It may be a good idea to have them come back and take a look at that again in light of the equity policy. The one thing, though, that even we could take a look at that, but booster clubs do not fall under the school system. So any money that a booster club raises and chooses to put toward a sports program, that would not be something we could say, oh, all of the booster clubs would have to put into the pot and we're going to divide it.
I mean, and as the booster president, we had 30 members last year. We have 70, and we're very excited that we have 7. We've doubled our membership. But when we asked our coaches, what would you need for your program? What are your goals? What can we help you with? Their list was sad. I mean, the volleyball coach wanted volleyballs. That they needed more volleyballs, that we don't have enough jerseys for the athletes to have the same away and home number. They weren't lavish requests. Helmet reconditioning, that's a safety issue. That's a lot of money, and that's mandated. So they weren't asking for parties or anything crazy or camo or pink jerseys for whatever. It's basic stuff. Right now we're trying to help them re-outfit the weight room because anybody who knows the legendary Ben Wright, most of the equipment in there is from his era. It looks like a Rocky movie. So there needs to be another way. We're doing the best we can with our 70 members. We paid $800 toward the brand new soccer goals, but The boosters paid a quarter of that, the girls' soccer team raised a quarter of that, the boys' soccer team raised a quarter of that, and the athletic budget paid for a quarter of that. We have to paint our fields. That's like $250 worth of paint that our counterparts that have turf don't have those maintenance fees. They have other maintenance fees, but we have to buy paint, and that you're paying those fabulous people to go out there and take care of that. So it's like we're in this hole that we can't ever get out of. And our athletes feel it, and the few fans that we do have feel it, and it's a huge equity issue at our high school.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Denny. I'm the parent of a third grader at Parkway Elementary and of a sixth grader at West Frederick Middle School.
And you brought them tonight.
I did,
they're,
indeed.
They're over there working hard.
Yeah, they're along for the ride. I'm here to speak to you, though, with my PTA president hat on. I'm the president of the Parkway PTA. We had our monthly meeting last night. We spoke about staffing challenges that we're experiencing at Parkway as well as some other smaller schools, an issue I know that you're familiar with. We're grateful, by the way, for you to have this opportunity for us to provide you feedback. My sense, incidentally, is that maybe we're a little bit, it might have been better to have this meeting a little bit earlier. If maybe there were other meetings I wasn't aware of, but I feel like maybe it's a little bit late if the plan is to present the budget to the board shortly after the holidays. But in any case, I wanted to talk about the staffing model. We were concerned, as you know, about the impact this year and perhaps next regarding media specialists, but really with regard to all of our specials teachers, you might say, or special staff members, counselors, media specialists, instructional assistants, these sorts of positions. Where at the smaller school, we have 1.0 presence for most of these positions, especially counselors and media specialists. I understand that the complexity factors that were used to build the staffing model proposal for next year's budget was evidence-based. I've got a couple questions about that. First, I'm wondering if you will share with the community that evidence, either online or in the budget book or in some other appropriate venue so that we can see what really is informing that process.
Absolutely. I mean, the research is very clear about the impact of poverty on achievement. And when you're an English learner, you need additional resources because not only are you trying to handle the academics, you're trying to learn the language. So I can certainly ask our system accountability and school improvement team to put some of that research up on board docs that goes along with it. I also want to assure you that you're not too late. The conversation about staffing started with our board last year. And we have spent a year looking at things, getting feedback. Dr. Marco met with media specialists. And when we brought that conversation back to the board at their last meeting at the end of November, one of the things we said to them was, we want some guidance from you as we begin to put together some plans, but they will make final decisions when they do the budget. And so in my budget, you're going to see basic staffing, and most of that's going to come from enrollment growth and things like that, but then you're going to see if you wanted to try to decrease class size, here's what it would cost each year. Do we add that money into the base budget? Or do we say, when we find out how much we're getting, this would be the top priority? So the timing of this and your feedback is fine, and the board is very aware of your feedback. Large schools are very aware of your feedback. I've gotten some emails saying, what's a junior great books program? Because we don't have that at my school, and they're saying they're losing something we don't even have. So the equity conversation is starting. In terms of assigning specials areas, at the elementary level, our music teachers, our art teachers, our phys ed teachers are allocated based on the number of classroom teachers you have in your building. So for every 15 classroom teachers, you would get one of each. And then we prorate it. And so we do have a lot of staff who might be 6/10, which would be 3 days at one school, 2 days at another. And we try to make sure that that transition comes on days, so you don't have to drive in the middle of the day and do that. So we have some schools that might have 1.4 phys ed teachers and another school that might have 0.6. When the formula was developed, the feeling was if you have a library, every school needs to have a media specialist to handle the library. Every school needs to have a guidance counselor. And so that's why when you look at that model, you will see some positions, no matter the size of the school, every school's getting a principal. You're going to, get that. Every school's going to have a secretary, those kind of things. So even with this new staffing model, there is every school's going to get at least, and then some of the schools that have more complexity may get additional staff. Now, that has been happening for many years, but it's never been transparent to the public in the budget book, because when the Thornton Commission started giving additional money, our school system said, we're going to use that to take care of class size in some of our more challenging schools, and we're going to put in maybe a math specialist to help because we know that schools' test scores indicate they need more help with math. And so you may have heard people talking about differentiated staffing. We had positions that had come under Thornton, and we literally called them the Thornton positions, that our directors would allocate out to schools. When we put our staffing committee together to begin to look at, the board very much would like to get class size reduced again. So the staffing committee was kind of taking a look at that and saying, what can we do to support this? What are the things we should look at? Part of what came out of that is, well, how are you deciding where to put these folks? And so that's when we said, there really should be a formula. There should be a way to describe it, because when we use that formula, the schools that they were allocating additional staff to are the schools that are showing up with these complexity factors. Now, the challenge for us with our smaller schools is that we have schools now that are getting below 150 students. And we're still trying to maintain a classroom teacher at each grade, a full-time media specialist, a full-time principal. And to do that, if you want to take a look at class size or adult to student ratio, your smaller school has a huge advantage over your larger school. And so part of what we began to look at was, are there ways that we can try to maybe balance some of that out? It became particularly difficult for media specialists because, again, over time your job evolves, and digital citizenship and being required to teach that as well as the content that they had. Many of the media specialists in our larger schools were saying, I can't get it all in. And so absent having a lot of money to add additional staff, we had to take a look at how do we do this. Now last year we got pretty drastic. We said just make it a half-time in the smaller schools, and the media specialists were like gasping. We couldn't do that, we couldn't do that. So that's why Dr. Marco spent a lot of time with them this summer looking at what are your responsibilities, because I know they wear a lot of different hats in the smaller schools. What's reasonable? How can we help? And that decision to ask, I think it was 6 of our schools, to share their media specialist one day every 3 weeks came out of their conversations. And I think as many of them have gone into the large school and been providing that support, they can really understand that their job and their colleagues' job are not anywhere near the same.
It's on that last point, if I could just interrupt you right there. I think it's great that your administration is using evidence-based, basing its policies and proposals upon the available academic evidence. It is intuitively understanding to me that poverty, that all the other factors you mentioned have an impact, not simply on academic performance, but classroom behavior. That makes sense, and I think it's great that you're willing and able to share that with us in terms of understanding what goes into these equations. I wonder, though, if your approach to media specialists and some of the other special staff is similarly evidence-based. I understood that Dr. Marco did meet with the media specialists this past summer, but I was concerned by how he characterized what is taking place currently with the media specialist to the board last week, both primarily at the working session that occurred. I understood he met with those specialists back in August, but it's only been just for a few weeks now, correct, that the media specialists have begun this redeployment, if you will, so that the smaller schools are getting a 0.8 or 0.9 presence. The larger schools are getting more than 1.0, and we all understand why they need that, right? But my sense is, I have reason to believe that the media specialists that are being redeployed maybe aren't experiencing quite the positive experience that Dr. Marco characterized to the board last week. Maybe aren't being utilized in a way that really builds in terms of curriculum presentation, and that they're being utilized in ways that maybe are more menial, administrative, if you will. And so I just hope that as you go forward in considering the formalization of, for example, a 0.8 or a 0.9 media specialist, a redeployment of staff, that you will be similarly evidence-based in how and when you do that.
And I want you to know that we are getting feedback from administrators. Mary Jo Richmond, who is our coordinator for media specialists here in central office, is working very closely with us and talking to her folks. You know, she is responsible for all of the media specialists across the whole system. And so those conversations continue to go on. One of the things our board has asked us is, should we look at allocating media specialists the same way as we allocate the other specials teachers? And, you know, looking in terms of, since they are also delivering a content and delivering services. And so we're working with Mary Jo to take a look at, you know, trying to kind of formalize and look at, is that a viable option? Does that work? You know, how does this play out? Now, I have to ask you a question, because I did ask our instructional director to go work with your principal to see if the junior great books that was being offered on the Friday that the media specialist was leaving could be offered on a different day. Has that happened, that they were able to find another day to schedule that so the kids could continue to do that program? Do you know?
My understanding is that process is unfolding, that's
Okay.
being worked on now. They are trying to find a workaround for this issue of the enrichment program that we have, the junior grade books. What they're unable to do, of course, is to solve the problem of the library not being open when our media specialist is not available, right? There are liability concerns with having a PTA volunteer, even a PTA volunteer who holds a part-time or full-time FCPS job, perhaps staff that library while the librarian or the media specialist is not there. So there needs to be some thought given to flexibility in these policies if we are going to move to a 0.8 or 0.9 presence. The other problem that, of course, hasn't been solved is the lack of staff at the school, right? The media specialist, where, as you know, they wear many hats. And so while there are media specialists during the day conducting curriculum, offering enrichment programs, and other tasks within the media centers, in the morning they may be helping with arrival and drop-off. In the afternoon, they may be helping with dismissal. In the morning, when a teacher calls in at the last minute sick, they may be a sub for a couple of hours or a full day. That problem still remains, and I fail to see how a 0.8 or a 0.9 media specialist is going to enable us to get by those things.
Well, then you also know, based on the staffing discussion, that we have a lot of schools where getting substitutes, having class coverage is a serious issue, and I don't know that that is simply our smaller schools. That's many of our schools, and so the board was also looking at that resident sub idea as a possibility. But again, and I know at the chat with the superintendent, I shared with you, we have been very fortunate in our county executive giving us above maintenance of effort funding for the last 3 years. State, the news from the state is constantly revenues aren't what they thought we were. We're beginning to hear that from our county government as well. And so you said, tell them what you want. I can't tell them what I want. All right? I will advocate for everything we need, and that bill is going to be big enough. And our board will advocate for what we need, what they know we need. We will put enhancements, many of the things we want to see happen and we know would make things great. But I also have been trying very much with staff, and I want to be very candid with the community, in managing expectations. Because if we don't see revenue growth at the state and we don't see revenue growth at the county, then being able to get a large amount above maintenance of effort is possibly not going to be that easy for us this year. And so when Heather presented that budget and she showed you 87% of it pays for the people who are doing the work, we have already trimmed a lot of the other pieces of that budget. There aren't a whole lot of places where we can find the funding to add additional things or do additional things. Mrs. Pellegrino and I have spent many years together trying to figure out what we can do just to fund the bare minimum. And it's not a pleasant thing to do. So if we can't give you everything you want, it's not because we don't care and we aren't willing to try. We will be as transparent as possible because our budget reality is frequently a challenging one. And right now we are working very hard, and I know that this has been a priority of our board. For many years I talked about the lack of competitiveness in our salary scale, and yet it was a very expensive salary scale. And so through a lot of heroic efforts on the part of our staff and on the part of our employee associations, we were able to look at recrafting our pay scale to make it more competitive, but to also make it more reasonable for cost. When you transition from one scale to another, that's the most expensive couple of years. And so right now we are in year 3 of a 4-year move to a new pay scale. And it's expensive. But we have to keep moving because the benefit will come 2 years out when we're there. And then our employees can feel a little more assured about moving up their increments. And our board won't be looking at the huge price tag that they looked at the year they decided they had to increase class size in order to give our employees a raise. So that pay scale continues to be something we're very committed to moving toward.
Thank you.
I'm going to see if the people behind you have a question. If not, I'll come back to you. Mr. Anderson, good to see you. Will Anderson, our student member of the board. You're just always here and very thoughtful, and I thank you for that. I thank you for that. Did you have something you wanted to share, a priority? Mr. Migdal?
My son just wanted to make sure we advocate.
And I saw you eloquently advocate for that at our Kerwin Commission hearing here at Frederick High School. And I don't know if you had a chance to, well, with our Curriculum and Instruction Committee, we presented a plan, and we have put out a request for proposal to get resources. And we have also put into that plan training for teachers. So you will not be forgotten in the budget, I promise you, okay?
We do appreciate that, and as an employee, I appreciate everything you've done for us. And the school that I work at is a complex school, and working with over 800 students with a military background and free and reduced and all that. We do appreciate the funds that we've gotten and the staffing we've gotten. We understand that the small schools and different schools have different things. It just helps out when we do get that extra staff, when we have 800 and when we have one media specialist, you have one, so it is different in the different sizes schools. And I think that when evidence comes out, that people can see that, it is a school, 800 kids, and some schools get one, some schools get 1.5 or 1 and a media assistant. It's a big difference to those kids.
Absolutely.
And to the staffing.
Thank you. All right, we're coming back to you then.
You mentioned the new pay scale and the increased scale. Just one thing you might want to think about is, have you been able to see any returns on that investment, like increased retention rates or being able to recruit higher quality new teachers, with higher GPAs or however you measure teacher quality? That might be a way to help sell it. I mean, the governor's a business guy, so if you can say, well, we invested this much in increasing our teacher competitiveness, and we've been able to, increase the quality of teachers that we're recruiting, and we believe this will have, X amount of increase in their effectiveness. I mean, that might be a good way to kind of demonstrate the ROI on the investment.
I'm
Just a
smiling
suggestion.
because you do realize that the state legislature passed some of the cost of retirement
I read about
down to
that.
the local level, because if we were willing to give those raises, then the state retirement system shouldn't have to bear the brunt of that if we were going to pay more. So they sent that back to the local. So I like your logic. We could try it, but I don't know. And I also know the Kerwin Commission, very interestingly, is they're talking a lot about teacher quality. And one of the things they think will happen is if we get better teachers in the classrooms, then they won't need as much central office support, and so we can cut our central office to pay for those better quality teachers. Nowhere in there did the idea of we would give you more money for them come into play, but I'm game for trying it and for sharing it. What I can tell you has been very helpful for us is we offer a $500 incentive if you tell us you're going to retire by March 1st. Put in the paperwork by March 1st. And the reason that helps us is because then we know for sure what vacancies we have coming. And so we can give an open contract to what we call the blue chippers, those absolutely fantastic teachers that we want in Frederick County no matter what. And with an open contract, then we secure them earlier in the hiring process. So that has definitely given us a return on our investment. With the pay scale, it's harder to measure for sure if that's what it is. We do take a look at exit data, and I can tell you that we designed this new pay scale. You would have loved it. I have to go back and see if it's still up there. It should still be there on board docs. But the data we had, we took our teachers and put them on every pay scale in the state to look at what it would cost if we paid our teachers on. And that's one of the ways we were able to convince folks that ours was really expensive compared to others. But one of the things we know is that we will never keep up with Montgomery County.
Sure.
And so there's a very vulnerable period, and it's usually at that point at which teachers are thinking about the second child in the family and needing a bigger home, or the realization that I have to pay college tuition begins to hit, and that's when our exit data will tell us that a $20,000 pay raise is all that, and they're willing to start making that commute. So when we designed, we took people up quickly, but then we leveled them off, because at a certain point, you talked about it earlier, when you feel a part of the team and you're invested in that, and your kids are in school here, you're probably going to be a little bit less likely to leave. We just haven't been able to really look at that yet because we haven't gotten to the new scale yet completely. We're still in that transition. What we're also hearing from our young teachers, we used to have 3 lanes on the scale. We've moved up to 5. And we've given them opportunities to move quicker across the lane, so then they control a little bit of the when I get a raise, as opposed to just I have to put in another year. And our young teachers particularly are really excited by that. And we've seen a lot of participation in professional development and growth increase because they see that as an avenue that they can control. So anecdotally, and a little bit of data-wise, I can share that with you about our pay scale. Once we get to full implementation, then we can start looking at recruit, retain, and some of those other pieces. But if you ever want to see those really cool charts, let me know.
It's on your
It was-
website now? Or?
I don't know if that would be on board docs or not, yeah. Well, we did it at a presentation in M&S, so there's probably a version of it out there. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a little tiny bit more of anecdotal data to that. I teach at the University of Maryland in the teacher prep program, and I've been there 18 years. And it's only been within the last 2 years because my cohort, so as it goes, of 20 to 27 elementary school seniors, pre-service teachers, are placed in PDS schools in Montgomery County. And so but oftentimes they live in Frederick, so I try to put them in their North County schools. That's a whole other story. But it's only been within the last 2 years where they've entertained applying to Frederick County because they have heard. So that news is trickling down where, I used to tell them because they'd be fabulous blue chippers, and I wanted them to be my kids' teachers. I'm like, come to Frederick County. And it was always that money piece, and I'd say, you'll grow into the aquarium that you have. You make no money now. Make this money and try this county out. But it's been within the last 2 years where I've had about a third where they wouldn't even entertain applying or interviewing at the MMEE. That has made a difference, that they are hearing that there's a shift in our county, and they're applying outside of just Montgomery County.
And you let us know. We will do whatever we can to open up student teaching placements for you. In the south end of our county, so that, students who live here. In fact, we actually had the president of the College of Education from Frostburg State University came to talk to us about trying to get into more schools in Frederick for her students. So we're happy to do that. The other place where we're really looking at recruitment is our Teachers Academy, right here in our Career and Technology Center, where we have students who are interested in teaching, and the classes those those students take are able to then articulate onto either a 4-year or a 2-year college for teacher preparation. But we want to get them so excited about coming home to teach where they graduated from. And so we're looking at, and you may have heard Dr. Kerr talked about maybe trying to do almost an apprenticeship type of program with them, but we're trying to look at a couple of possibilities. And then the other place we have fabulous instructional assistants who are getting experience every day working with our students, and many of them are definitely blue chippers. And so supporting them to earn their teaching degree and kind of trying to grow your own. And that's something we know is really going to be critically important for us as we try to increase the diversity among our teaching staff as well. But the overarching challenge to all of that is enrollment declining in teacher ed programs.
Yes, when I said 27, so last year I had 27 seniors. This year I have 20. But the good news is I have 25 juniors that I'll get in January. So enrollment, but for 2 years it's been declining.
And statewide we don't produce enough for the need, and we used to recruit a lot of our teachers from Pennsylvania, which is why we have so many Steelers fans in Frederick County. And but because Pennsylvania was huge for producing teachers, and they no longer have enough to fill their own state's need. And so it is getting really hard to find people who want to do that job. And so recruiting and retaining, critically important for us. Any other questions, comments, things you want us to make sure we don't forget when we put this budget together?
I just have one question about going back to my original question. When you said that the equity group, or I'm not sure how it was characterized, you talked about something similar and it wasn't well received. May I ask who makes up the group?
Well, that was administrators, athletic directors. I don't know who else was on there. And that's when the decision was, for right now, just take the additional $1 to help fund the officials' raises. And then, as I said, in light of the board's equity policy, I think, and I loved your statements tonight, that we should reconvene and take a look at that again. And we might see people be a little more amenable to that conversation. But, and you know, if you listen to our board, we want to be equitable, but there are challenges in that because people look at equity in different ways,
Right,
too.
equitable, I was trying to tell my son, who's the high school senior, equitable isn't equal. You know, dividing the gate fee 50-50 when you're playing against a team that has 75 football players and we have 50, that's not equal. I mean, that's disequal. They need to outfit 75 folks. But if they make at the gate more than they need for that, and we don't have 75 players because we can't outfit 75 players, then that's an equity issue. So, you know, we're trying to explain to, you know, adolescents that it's not 50-50, but it's also currently not equitable.
And so advocacy continues to be critically important. And as I said, feel very, very grateful that our county executive and our county council have been funding us above maintenance of effort, because for many years we got maintenance of effort. But as they face tight budgets, knowing what the priorities of the community are is going to be critically important. So your voices here matter. Your voices with our Board of Education matter. Your voices with our county executive and our county council matter even more. And so I know we have up here when I will release my proposed budget, and as I said, we'll have a based budget, and then we will have all of the enhancements of the things we would like to do and add into that base budget. So that'll happen on January 4th. If you have friends who said, gee, I was at the civility event on Tuesday, I couldn't get right back out there on Wednesday, but I want to tell the superintendent something, we do have an email, fcps.budget@fcps.org, and we collect all of that feedback, and our board will see that. They do ask for that as well. And then on our website, all the list of when the hearings will be. Our board's hearing, the county council, county executive, and all that stuff. Is there anything else I forgot or I should add?
People can participate in, for example, your budget release online and ask questions and do everything online as well.
Well, you shouldn't tell them that or nobody will show up.
They are showing up online.
So we will make sure that people have the opportunity, and when we've done that in the past, we actually have a live Twitter feed where we'll see questions pop up about the budget. So we'd love to see you in person, and you can bring our wonderful students with you. But if not, there is also that option, and that will all be well advertised after everybody has a wonderful, relaxing winter break, and they come back for, it's hard to believe it's going to be 2018, but it will be. Thank you so much for coming out and advocating and sharing priorities with us. It means a lot to us. We appreciate it. Hey guys, it will be 2018, believe it or not. I was like,